What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Insane Blaine 330. Today I'm at the Ohio Penn Bigfoot Paranormal Conference. There's going to be some speakers and they got some vendors. So without further ado, here goes the first speaker, Amy Boo.
That documentary by Doug Hychek, who is the producer of Monster Quest. Anybody ever see the first one? It's one of the things that really convinced me that Bigfoot was possible. Well, Project Zoo Book, many of our scientists and myself interviewed this past December for Sasquatch Legend Meets Science 2. So I'm like, I don't care if they just have a little bit of me and they're picking my nose or something. I don't care. I'll just be excited that I'm in this documentary because I think it's one of the most exciting things going on with science. If you don't know Doug Hychek, he is somebody that I really would consider to be a genius. I wrote his resume for him, I rewrote it for him, and he has invented like hundreds and hundreds of things. He was the guy who invented the camera that first captured the giant squid alive and swimming. So he is into this, and he absolutely believes that Sasquatch is real. So it's very exciting. Hopefully I'm not picking my nose or tell my mom I said that. But I'm just excited to give you a little bit of it. And what's next on my bucket list? This is what I wanted to tell you about. Because maybe you or someone you know would want to join in for this. Basically, how many of you ever watched the show Alone on the History Channel? So it's like Survivor on steroids, you know. The people are really dropped out alone and they're filming themselves. So if you watch it, and if you watch season 7, you might recognize the gentleman I'm with there on the left. That is Roland Walker. He's the winner of season 7, spoiler alert. He survived 100 days out in the Arctic at Great Slave Lake, and he's amazing. He's a super nice guy. We become friends, and we were supposed to do this last year. It didn't work out, but in 2026, we are taking a team to Alaska and looking for Bigfoot. Now, he is an expert hunting guide, and he is from Clearfield County, PA, but he moved to Alaska like between 20 and 30 years ago, and he lives off the land pretty much. He's a beast in the woods. So we're going to be going out there. He lived with the Inuit for a while, learned all about Bigfoot, and he wants to go to where they are supposed to be. So we're going to be flying out to Fairbanks. We're going to take planes into the interior and a skiff down the river, and we're looking for people to go with us. We have a team of 3, 4 including me so far. We need 2 more people to complete our team, so we are taking interviews for that. If you're interested, I will tell you about the price. I'll tell you all about it. But I'm excited and terrified because, you know, bears and all that. But I'm really mostly excited. So, tell everybody about it. We need 2 more people on our team. I figure if I get him, he killed a muskox with a knife. Did you see that one? Like with a knife, a big giant muskox. So I'm like, okay, my chances of getting killed by a grizzly at least go down when he's around, right? But I told him, like, you can't leave me or I'm gonna die. So, you know, it'll be fine. Anyway, so that's about me. Thank you for listening and listening to my breathing and all that. So our first speaker, all right, wait a minute. I gotta get in here because remember I said I'm going to just read it because I feel like I forget important things. Okay. Oh, and my cheater glasses. 1 minute. All right. Oh, and the other thing I forgot. Back here is that my wonderful friend Tara decided to put up for me. I'm doing a raffle on a quilt that my mom made. She's 85 years old. She loves to sew, and she did this quilt. So any money we make will go to her. We're selling chances on the raffle for $3. Professional. Tony Lavorna specializes in obscure paranormal and anthropological topics. He is an accomplished researcher, author, and public speaker on the subject of local legends and lore throughout Western Pennsylvania with more than 35 years of experience. He is a contributing writer in the book Supernatural Lore of Pennsylvania, edited by Thomas White. Tony has co-authored Haunted Roads of Western Pennsylvania. He has authored other titles such as Astonishing Tales of Pennsylvania, Eastern Woodland Indians, Lives, Legends, and Lore, and UFOs Across Pennsylvania. This I can attest to. He incorporates his chilling voice to spin tales of terror. Uh-oh, where'd my other part go? Uh-oh, where'd my other part go? There it is, sorry. In addition to these accomplishments, here, I'm going to say it again. Tony is a selected author who appears in the Festival of Books in the Alleghenies. So he does tales of terror on his podcast. And he does have an awesome, awesome voice. I love him.
Thank you, everyone.
I love it.
Hi, folks. How's everybody doing today? I can't hear nobody. Everybody live and okay out there?
Yeah.
If I'm sitting in a room full of ghosts, I want to know about it already. I need some more material. All right. Okay. All right. Yes, Ryan, I promise I'll stay behind the podium from this point forward. I promise. Okay. Amy, thank you. Folks, good morning. My name is Amy Stan. I'm author Tony Lavorna. For over 35 years, I've been studying what you folks probably today refer to as the supernatural or the paranormal. Back in the day, I didn't call it all those fancy names. It started off with something that interested me very much. And that was something people refer to today as NDEs, or near-death experiences. Now, I know today we're going to be talking about folklore and legends, but I just thought I'd give you a brief kind of history of how this all started for me. And my interest in all of this probably started when I was just maybe 13, 14, 15 years of age. And like you, I'm sure I was, typical American boy, comic books, science fiction movies, what have you. The one thing in particular, when I was about 13, 14, my aunt, my mother's sister, she had a horrendous accident. And she ended up losing her right leg. It had to be amputated.
Yeah, we can.
And she sat me down one day, my mother was there, and they were talking, and I probably should have been eavesdropping, but I did, on their conversation. And what she began to relay to me, and to my mother at that time, was her experience that happened to her, that occurred at that near-death experience that she had. So what happened in short was, she was in her car, another car collided, they had to take her out. This was in early, I think, 72, 73, somewhere around there. And they rushed my aunt, who was a nurse, to the hospital, and she slipped to like a shock, a coma. And then what happened next was probably really something I still to this day have trouble trying to reconcile in my mind, because I'm not the person that kind of lends himself to all kinds of wild theories, but there it is. Anyway, she has this operation on the leg, and while they're operating, her heart stops. Now, from what she told me, clinically, I think they said she was gone for over 15 minutes. I can tell you from a scientific aspect of it, I believe 8 minutes of oxygen will guarantee you probably brain damage or some form of that. So 15 minutes is a long time in the chamber. Okay, so to move this along, she then feels herself leave her body, and she is looking down at the room where the doctors are trying to operate on her to save her life. So at this point, what she relayed to me is what I'm going to relate now. She said that as her body was laying there, she could see, hear, even what the people were thinking and saying within that room. The next thing, boom, she's kind of in this light in his tunnel. As she's going down this, she says, from what her recollection was that she said there seemed to be a man, like a shadow, in front of me, but the light was so blinding behind this person or this entity that I could not even fixate to look at this person's persona, their face, and their hand. At that, this entity reached out a hand and said to my aunt, Beverly, are you ready now? He called her by name. So my aunt, who said that she was not afraid, that she was not in any pain, reached out for the entity. At this point, this is where things get a little really crazy. She takes the hand of that entity and she draws back. She takes her hand back. She changed her mind. She says, I have a husband, 3 children. My husband is handicapped. He has one good eye. He was in the Air Force. I can't leave him with those children. I gotta go back. And at that, boom, she's back. Okay, back in that room, in that hospital, in that operation. Okay, fast forward the story so we can get on to folklore for you. So what happens next is she goes through all the things. She goes through the necessary rehabilitations. They get her, she became diabetic, insulin, all of that. She's going to be discharged from the hospital. One of the nurses come up to her before she leaves and kind of gives her they get to, know one another, as you do sometimes in tragedies. And she goes to leave and she turns to my aunt and says, Beverly, can I ask you just one question? Where did you get that mark on your hand? Because I didn't see it when we were doing the operation. Of course, I wasn't looking for it. But she said, what mark are you talking about? On her right hand, folks, was an impression, almost like there would be 3 fingers. When that entity touched her, and she did. Now, I understand, for a lot of people, I might say, oh, that's horse buggy, Tony, that's crazy, whatever. I don't know. I'm only telling you what she told me. But that's what kind of got me interested. And it got me interested in thinking about other things, about death, about ghosts, about all of these other things that happen in our world. Now, fast forward a couple of more years, and I'm now in college. And I'm taking history, and I'm interested in folklore, and I start to look and think about folklore beliefs and mysticisms and all of these other things that near-death experiences are foresight in my mind at that point. So while I was in college, and this was just, a little bit before all the internet and everything we have access to today, a young fella, I thought, what could be the harm in putting your name and phone number out there and asking people? He's laughing back, I'm laughing too. I thought to myself, what could be the harm in putting your name, phone number out there with near-death experiences and things of that matter? Well, I'm going to tell you something, folks. I never imagined the volume of information and people who were going to try to contact me with things that they experienced, things that they began to have happen to them. And when I say experiences, I want to be clear, it wasn't just near-death experiences, apparitions, ghosts, hauntings, shadow people, demons, the occult, people who dealt with cryptids, and they're interested in cryptids, Bigfoot, Mothman, this thing called Dogman. So I found myself really trying to interview people, go to these things, investigate on my own. I was certainly not a professional. I'm more interested in folklore and legends, which we're going to talk about here. But that's how this all started for me. And I can say 35 years later, I'll tell you, it's been one heck of a ride. It's been one heck of a ride. I've seen a lot of things myself. I've had some things happen on some of these things. I don't do much in the way of investigating anymore. I kind of stick with more writing about them and stories and things like that. It's what interests me now. So let's turn to our presentation today. And I just wanted to say how much I appreciate all of you. Because, sometimes I see screens and I see numbers and I see what people, they purchase the books, they listen to a podcast or something, I get a little star there or something. But I wouldn't continue to do it if I didn't meet great people like you. So don't ever change. Don't ever let anybody tell you you're full of baloney. And most of all, enjoy the journey. There's something else, okay? If you ever need to talk, you can find me. I'm just about everywhere, okay? All right, let's get to it. All right, I'll tell you, this is going to be good. Okay, so folklore and legends, folks. I'm going to just break this real simply up to like 3 little acts. Hopefully I'll be able to stay within the time, and if I can't, then I'll gladly forfeit the stage. Act 1, we're going to look at folklore, folk tales, their definitions, the way in which it is communicated, cultural fears versus social fears, as well as the common themes. In Act 2, I hope to tell you a little bit more about folklore's impact and somewhat rich history as reflected in our region. By the way, I got to tell you, you guys are in a great area. Between Youngstown, Ohio, between Mercer, Newcastle. I tell you what, I probably could write about folklore for the next 5-10 years about this place, because there's a lot of things that happen around here. So, kudos to you. I don't know what you're doing, but this is a real magnet for here, isn't it? Okay. Act number 3, we're going to just talk about some regional examples of the folklore, and we get to that, hopefully. I'll be able to talk about one of the ones that I love to talk about, and that's Hogback Run Road. Okay, so here we go. So what about it? Why do folklore and tales intrigue us so much today? Well, let's examine these tales closer. First, let's ask the right question. Why do these tales continue to evolve? Especially in an era of high technology, science, advanced communications. It would seem today that interest in the supernatural and paranormal is quite widespread. More so than ever before in society, and at first glance, it does not appear to make sense, does it? I mean, it's almost anti-chronistic. We're advancing more with all of our technologies, but yet we find ourselves interested in folk legends and the tales of ghosts and the tales of things going by and the paranormal. Okay? Well, but as we know, human beings, they can be both rational and irrational sometimes, okay? So we have to take all this into effect. Science may be able to explain why much of our world is the way it is, and that's very important. Scientists do a heck of a job, they try very hard. But it still cannot explain all of it. Scientific explanations do not impart sometimes a deeper meaning to life and give it purpose. So to understand humans and perceive or experience things, there are both sometimes that which is unquantifiable or even unmeasurable all the time. And that's kind of what sometimes these tales can do too. They show us a little bit about who we are, what we're afraid of, what our society fears are. Perhaps then it is because the supernatural holds the promise that there is something more than the material world that we see every day. So then just maybe by going to haunted roads or going to a place where there's supposed to be an apparition, you're experiencing some type of supernatural event. And an individual can test the unseen world in some way. It'll give you some type of validation for some maybe of your own questions. As we will soon learn, these legends associated with haunted roads, places, people, etc., we will see that the legends associated with them are often localized manifestations of larger cultural scares and moral panics about perceived threats to our society. Sometimes these haunted places or tales can allow visitors to indirectly address their fears and issues, or at the least provide context in which to kind of broach the topic. Even better, it allows one to address the biggest fear of all, the fear of death. Definition time. What exactly is folklore? Well, one definition may be the traditional beliefs, customs, and stories of the community passed through the generations by word of mouth. What exactly is a folktale? Definition. A folktale could somewhat be defined as a story or tale that defies one's belief and is based in part on circumstances beyond the scope of our conventional reality. Furthermore, these tales may be recited over and over until they become a legend or an unsubstantiated belief in a community. Now, there are three basic ways traditionally in which to communicate folk tales, and they are, number one, hearing a legend person to person, or a person to a group like we're going to do today. Second, legends that are written down in books. This is kind of what I like to specialize in doing, folks. I take these tales, I collect them from our neighborhoods, from our people, from our witnesses, we put them in a published work. Okay. The third, modern times, guess what? Hello, we have internet, we have electronic media. All of these things help now to change the ball game, and we'll talk about that more in a second. So let's break the first one down here a little further. Hearing the tale, legend, person to person. Number one, sometimes how a legend is heard is as important as the legend is itself. Now, long ago, there was only one way, word of mouth to a person. However, this made for a short lifespan for the tale. What do I mean by that real quick? Well, you know, if it's only one person and one person and one person to a small group, then most of these tales may have been lost to history, you see, folks, because they're not spreading. They're not being put in written form or being put down for, you know, posterity's sake. Now, one of my favorite people that I like to read his books, Bill Ellis, is an expert on legends. And he broke down the category kind of for folk legends and tales as such. He said, one, you have the marginal experience. What was experienced by a person or a group? And there's two. Tales where they were transformed to words and was shared in a rough form, either by a person or a person's or group. Sometimes you'll hear terms thrown around, a kernel narrative or a polished piece of literature. We'll talk a little bit about those terms too, okay? So the rough version, number three, rough version, is refined to a finished narrative. This makes things a little more polished and sometimes more coherent for the listener. And the last but not least, I don't know why that got all crazy there, but I'll read it to you. That's supposed to say the next is what we call a kernel narrative. That's a brief summarized report. It's much easier for relaying for an individual to another individual or group. Now, somebody may say to you, did you hear the full legend of the White Lady, or the full legend of Mystery Mile Road in Beaver? You know, and they give you a little synopsis real quick. That's what they're talking about. That's what that's referring to. Now, the second way in which we put these things or give legends a life is legends in books. In this manner, the legend or tale is written down and further put into a written form. It doesn't matter whether it is a hardcover book, electronic, what have you. What this does is fix that legend now into a lifespan. It can be called up whenever an individual or a group needs to refer to it or remember it. This will be important too. Number 3, legends on the internet. Yes, legends can be told to a much wider audience faster, due in part to our internet. This in turn can spread the word much faster in the days gone by. It can also serve for people to share their experiences with individuals or chat groups. This in turn allows these legends to have a much longer longevity, sometimes giving the tale even new life for each new up and coming generation. Now I gotta tell you just real quick, when I was still conducting my research, kind of like in my heyday of doing these things, one of the things that fascinated me about the internet, okay, was the fact that these young people and middle-aged people, even older people, would get onto these chat rooms and they would talk about their experience of what they felt or their fear or even what they experienced when they went to these sites. That blew me away. You know why? Because I had a revelation about something there. I began to realize that these people are now becoming the history of this particular legend or folk tale too. Because you see, their experiences are now another layer to the legends of what these folk tales are. So in itself, they are feeding into a new generation. They're adding their own layer, okay? Again, the kernel narrative, I told you, I'll give you a little definition. There would be an example right there. Green Man Tunnel. Go there. You take your headlights of your automobile, you're going to flash it 3 times. Or on a rainy, stormy night, you're supposed to go to Green Man's Tunnel or call out his name 3 times. Green Man, Green Man, Green Man, show yourself. And then all of a sudden, in that particular folklore, this entity, this figure, this apparition, who has a hat and a coat, is green, and the aura, he's supposed to come out and chase you. Okay? Just told you a kernel narrative. Gave you a little thought, I gave you the real quick. God bless you. You're welcome. Urban legends versus social fears. Most frequently, lore will address one of the 2 subjects. Usually it's a mixture of both. It's not one or the other. Those who experience these phenomenon, the changes through the years, and then our modern times. I'm going to try to bring this up for you. I'm sorry, I keep looking at my watch. Time goes fast when you're having fun. Act 2, folklore, its impact on the history in our region. Okay. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to read it to you so you don't have to worry about it. Okay. Let me see. Let me just take a quick drink. Oh, that's good. Okay, water. Pennsylvania in general has historically been recognized for its mighty industry. More recently, it has been known for both the medical and scientific communities. It would not be an exaggeration to say Pennsylvania, like our great American cities, once drew its mighty workforce from a very diverse group of immigrants who traveled here with dreams of a better life. These immigrants came from diverse backgrounds, different customs, and different folk beliefs. As they became productive citizens in this new world, they helped to form communities. Though many things changed for them, it could be argued one thing did often remain. That was their belief in their individual customs, as did their belief in their folk traditions. This was evident in the communities in which they resided and worked to build a nation. These traditions helped to forge a sense of belonging here. Eventually, these folk tales became an important part of our collective unwritten history. Now, often the tales helped to shed a light on perhaps members of society who were sometimes looked over. For example, and I'll explain this, both women and children were often overlooked in the old days. But with these tales, they too were able to find a voice in the new world. Folk legends could be sage warnings. They could remind of great losses. And most of all, they could help to commemorate even important events, something that we didn't want to lose and forget. Now, what did I mean sometimes women and children? Well, I'll give you a quick example, and I'll try to keep moving it along for us. You know, the story that took place in Ligonier, Pennsylvania long ago was the very first story that I ever got up and talked about in front of a group of people. It was the legend of Betty Knox, who lived up in Kentucky Knob. Okay, now real quick, I'll give you the real quick on the lowdown on that. Okay, now Betty Knox was beautiful, flaxen hair, beautiful girl, 17 years of age, lost her mother, her father raised her. He put her on a little farm with him. Okay, now at one point he passed away, and young Betty, she did all the farm work. In fact, she'd take her oxen all the way out 20-some miles back and forth to the grist mills to bring her little valley, you know, the wheat and so on and so forth, and stuff from the grist mill. One day she disappears. The whole town goes looking for her. The only thing they find is the skeletons of her oxen who were chained to these trees in the forest. Now, first down, she never chained her oxen any time, ever. Okay? Something happened to her. Nobody knows. Was it a jilted lover? I mean, she's a beautiful girl. She had many suitors. Was it perhaps some thieves or bandits? I don't know. They say that these days, if you go to Kentucky Knob late at night, and on a starry night with a full moon, you'll actually hear Betty Knox's oxen and them chains. Tick, tick, chain, chain. Still walking through there, and the sobs and cries of her walking that forest. Okay? Now, back in the old days, again, sometimes somebody like that wouldn't even get this much of a spotlight. But because of the folk legend, you mattered. You all matter. Now today we're a little bit more diverse, we're a little bit more educated, we'd like to think. We try to include everybody. But that's what folk legends helped to do even way back then. Okay? You may ask yourself, how did these legends and folk beliefs actually originate? To answer fully this question, we have to turn back the clock to when our country was much younger. Most of the current day belief systems and folklore stem from our immigrant population. We often strongly held on to these beliefs. Quite simply put, these beliefs, customs, were often a link to their past. The old country is sometimes referred to by the immigrants. They also serve to create something familiar in the strange new world in which they now live day by day. In short, it gave them a rite of passage, traditions. It could be argued that most of these folk tales have their roots in folk magic. Now here in Pennsylvania, the state founded by William Penn and his Quaker associates had a multitude of both witches, witchcraft, and existed. One reason for this indirectly is tied probably to the Quakers' general tolerance for other people's religious beliefs and such. This relative freedom of religion appealed to numerous German immigrants who were members of both traditional and sometimes obscure religious sects. They had a strong belief in the supernatural. Other settlers who made the trip here as well brought their own traditions. Pennsylvania has a long record, folks, in preserving such folklore and history, and many of these accounts of which have survived today. Such accounts are not always as thoroughly documented as scholars might prefer. However, this offers us at least a unique perspective, I feel, in which that we could kind of peer into their origins and belief systems. Now, as far as the Germanic people, when out here, you'll have the Germanic people. You may have have heard about, like the hex and things of that nature. I can't go into all of that. I would love to go into all that right now with you, but we can't because of time restraints. But I would say, read up on it. It's not quite what we always thought it was. Thomas White wrote an excellent book on the witch of Mulderry recently. Thomas White, Professor White, he's a very good friend of mine, and he and I co-authored Haunted Roads in Western Pennsylvania. I do have a few copies here today if you're interested. Now, not all tales carry a direct link to historical links to them, okay? These tales then fall into the next category, and that is the urban legend. These tales are not true in the sense that sometimes they represent actual people in an occurrence, but they sometimes representations of our social fears, okay? The urban legends carry warnings about perceived dangers, moral threats, are often initially indistinguishable from the historical linked type of lore and folklore. But we'll get into this in more in a second here. At last, it is important that these tales be anchored against a place and their historical background from which the legends emerge from. Okay, common themes and historical context. Now, I'll try to go through this. I'm seeing at times getting closer and closer. I love to have more information than less for you. I try to always give you a little bit more. Okay. One thing probably changed the urban legends and the folklore that we all talk about today more than anything else. And I bet you donuts to dollars you couldn't tell me in my mind or your mind what that one thing probably was. From the old type of ghost tales and folklore to our new modern day. Anybody want to take a guess what one thing may have changed our society a lot? I'll give you a hint. 1930s, 1940s? Anybody? I promise I won't laugh at you. I'm not going to be up here to make fun of you. How about this? World War II, folks. When the people, our people, come back home, our young men and women, Muslim young men, of course, back in that day, 1941, 1945. World War II helped to shape kind of this world that we're going into right here, believe it or not. Now I'm going to explain this to you pretty quickly, so stay up with me, okay? They come home. Their generation now has something that we didn't quite before that war, and that's a little bit of affluence, a little bit of money. The young people, they now go to their little junk heaps, their little hot rods, kind of like the kind we had when we were younger, you know. Now they want to go around and see things. There's a little bit more time now that the war's over. There's no more rationing. There's no more worried about that. They can now focus on things that they kind of want to look at, investigate. So the young people start to do these little things, these little investigations, and have these little tales. So here we are, 1950s. This is what's happening with this culture now. And believe me, it's not by accident that all the entertainment things were kind of geared at them just like today. They had we had movies, we had science fiction, we had the comic books, we had everything that kind of threw it in their lap to get them interested in these things again. Okay? Now, let's go up into the 60s. Yeah. Guess what? Things changed again. Now there's a resurgence in mysticism, Druidism, Wicca movement again, which is different from the Wicca movement from long ago, the beginning of the country in the 1700s. Poltergeist, ghosts, Bigfoot, UFOs. That is all a part of the things that start to come back into public interest then, okay? The films, you know, everything else. These are all leading into the things that we are now looking at today started rolling out. By the time the 70s get here, things become a little bit more twisted. What do you mean, Tony? Twisted? How? Twisted what way? Well, It's kind of like the 70s, you know, after Watergate, after so many things being involved, what have you. People become a little bit jaded, a little bit prejudiced about how truthful the government is and what they're saying and doing for us, we the people. So in the 70s, we begin to see with their misdeeds sometimes the growth of conspiracy theories, the things we talk about now. You know, JFK, who was killed a decade before, but now those things are being talked about. CIA are being talked about. You know, the black budget projects and things, the things that kind of work in the shadows. Now we're going to fall forward a decade into the 80s. Now comes a resurgence that has changed, because in the 70s, the paranormal community was kind of still there, but it was kind of in the down low. It wasn't real prevalent, okay? It wasn't real in your face. But the 80s were coming. And in the 80s, we kind of switched gears into another thing that happened, another odd thing with urban legends, and that's the satanic panic, okay? And that's when, you know, people believed that, you know, there were a lot of these cults and people doing these horrific things. Since this is a mixed crowd, I can't see if there's any children out there or not. I'm not going to get too graphic. You understand. Most of you live through it like I have. But this, again, changed the dynamics of urban legends, folklore again. It was another layer. Now we go up to the 90s. The internet brings and pushes the paranormal finally into the mainstream. Now it's not just, oh, let's watch X-Files or let's watch the old black and white zone. You know, I don't know, the Twilight Zone or something. People are now interested, and now it has become mainstream. Now we have a face. We have an identity too. Because if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you fine people. We'd all be out doing something else. Okay? By the time the 2000s get here, folks, the internet now through the 90s is in swing. 2000 comes, boom. Now we have paranormal ghost hunters, or as we would rather be referred to, I believe they would rather be referred to as ghost investigators. So they're not hunting, they're investigating, okay? And that's where we got to today. That's where we're at, okay? So, Act 3, I guess we're almost here at the end. Oh, geez, I'm almost at the end of time. Let's do this real quick. How about that? Okay. Do I got 5 minutes? Is that good, everybody? Okay, 5 minutes. Let me just take one more drink of water.
Tony, the next speaker's not till 12:30. You're good.
Okay, good. This is pretty much it anyway. So, okay, Hogback Run Road. One of my favorites, folks. One of my favorites. Okay, it runs only about a mile or so. In my estimates, I guess, a lot of activity. Let's go back to the 1700s. Here we go. This road, this trail, this Hogback Trail. Okay. Young woman is in her buggy traveling that night. You can picture this, folks, right? You're on the buggy, the horse clop, 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 clop. You see her going down this dark path. She decides, I'm going this way as opposed to that way. She has her little children with her. And as she's approaching through the valley, she's going through almost monotonous, like you or I may feel when we're traveling in the car, and the wipers are with that serpentine, and you grow tired. And you just say to yourself, God, I just wish I'm home. I want to be home. You have your children. You're like, I got to stay awake. I got to be here in a moment. So here she is. Clock, clock, clock. All of a sudden, something spooks the horse. The horse rears up. It trembles. It falls. It takes the buggy and the children and her. In a second, in a flash. Boom. Now she's under it, the children, and they're crushed. At that spot, in that particular folktale, that would be where this bridge sits. Now let me give you version number 2. Oh, didn't I tell you? Oh yeah, folk legends are interesting because they sometimes have different variations. Kind of like for the younger people out there, you know how you like your superheroes, and they have infinity worlds and alternate realities and Earth 1 and Earth 2. Well, folklore, it beat them to the point. It has different versions. And when you're getting old like me, you probably heard all the versions, so I can tell you all the versions. So the second one, here we are, the woman again. She's down the road. Plop, 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 plop. The children are there by her side again, tired, weary. But this time she comes to this little wooden bridge. In this one, again, something happens. Is it the animal that started? Is it something that she saw? But again, in this one, there's a tragedy, and they fall. And again, she dies and the children. Now, fast forward the story to the 1960s, 1970s. Here we go again. But this time, it's like the Amish community or somebody, or the Dutch community. And they're in the wagon this time, going down the road, that lovely hogback run road, okay? And in this version, it isn't something that spooked the animals. In this version, it's those terrible drunk teenagers. And they hit the wagon, and they cause her to die at the spot. Okay? What happened right there? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you real quick. Okay, the only thing that changed there, folks, was the time. But there's something else. You see, legends in folklore can change with each passing generation. That's what we were just talking about just a little while ago. Okay? Just a little while ago. They change with each passing layer. And someday, you younger people out there, when you're in the chat rooms and you're talking, someday when you're like me, old and gray, listening to these things, you're going to smile on your face because you're going to realize, oh my God, there's about 5 or 6 new layers to this legend. Okay? Now, another thing I like that happened on Hogback Run Road. Anybody been on it lately? Any show of hands? Oh, I knew you. I knew you would. Okay. Another thing is the woods. Sometimes people see orbs, or if they don't see these light orbs, they see Native American Indians from back in the French and Indian War. Okay. And I have some great books on that too on my desk up there if you're interested. But these legends see these Indians come out and they startle the people, the passerby. Okay. Now, if you do go down the road, I want you to understand the wooden bridge is no longer there. They put in a nice new concrete bridge. Okay. But unlike the wooden bridge, the folk legends have still remained. They're still strong. Okay. Now, one of the other tales on Hogback Run Road, and I gotta talk about her, you know, I would feel remiss if I didn't say this. There's this other guy, this green man, okay? Now, here we go. Am I still in view? Am I okay? All right. I'll get in trouble if I get out of the pulpit, okay? So here we go, folks, my all-time favorite. If there was ever a legend or a folklore that I would want to tell all my people and all my friends, it's the story of Charlie No Face, the Green Man. Our story is a unique one. Here we go. When I was a boy, I had this beat up old Chevy Impala. You could almost see through the floor of it. Don't matter. As a rite of passage, me and some other guy friends, we get some of our girlfriends. And over in South Park, the library go down this road called Piney Fork Road and Snowden Road. And there was this little salt tunnel. I don't think you used it for salt way back then. It don't matter. But in that tunnel, that young version of little Tony and his friends believed that there was this entity in there, this green man. And we had to go see him. See? Because little Ray Ross, one of my friends that was about that high, had to dare us, had to double dog dare us to go down there. Because we were chickens. We weren't going to go to the Green Man. The heck with that. Power into the Impala. Boom, down we go. Okay? So here's the legend. This is called ostension. The act of acting it out. You're supposed to go to part of the legend, you go to this tunnel. You park your car. You either flick the lights 3 times, or sometimes everybody exits the car. And you go up to this tunnel. You yell out,
Green man, green man, green man, show yourself.
and then that apparition is supposed to come out of there and chase you out of there like a bat out of hell. Now, I would like to think little Tony and those other friends of mine, we walked up there, you know, like John Wayne or something, you know, and stood there and yelled that out on a stormy night. The truth of the matter, I think we ran up there so fast and said it, I don't think a mouse could have heard us, and we ran back to the car and said, see, there's nothing there. Okay. And that was fun, it was fun. But let me tell you something. That wasn't right. That wasn't where the Green Man was. Oh no. See, the fun of being a writer and a researcher is you get to really research things. And you sometimes look for the bear, and sometimes you find the bear. Okay? Here's what I mean. South Park wasn't the location of the Green Man. Sorry if anybody's from like Piney Fork Road or Library. Green Man was saw over McKeesport. Nope. How about McKee's Rocks the other way? Nope. No. Remember when I told you at the beginning of this presentation, you guys live in a really cool area. Okay. Well, let's go to the town of Cobble. And back in the day, there was this little boy that was born. He lost his father. And this little boy, we'll call him Ray. Ray was an average little boy, loved to have fun like any other little boy. Till one day, on a hot summer day in July, Ray and his friends went walking down to their favorite little water hole. Now, did I mention, this is all like in the 1920s. Did I mention that at all? Oh, okay. That's important. So, when little Ray went walking that day, did I tell you that Ray was born 2 days before Halloween? No? Oh, Jesus. I'm getting like Columbo. I forget everything. Okay. So there's Ray and his little friends walking over the railroad tracks. And somebody says to Ray, hey, Ray, I'm triple dog. Dare you climb up that telephone pole and steal those little blue robin eggs up at the top of that telephone pole? What could go wrong, right? Right. So up goes little Ray, because if you're triple dog nigger, what happens? What happens? Huh? You gotta do it. Gotta do it. Unless you want to be chicken. So up he goes, folks. There's one little thing I think I forgot to mention. That wasn't a telephone pole. What that actually was the overhead canton area line. to the little Harmony trolley that went through Cobble. And when little Ray touched that line, he's a little tight. He touched that line, he came in contact with it. Bang, zap. By 22 dozen, 12,000 volts. Boom, off he goes. Down to the ground. By some act of God or some act of nature. Oh, some act of nature. He survives, but not the same. He's got both of his eyes. He's gonna have his nose burned off. He's gonna lose his left arm from below the elbow. It's gonna leave him with a grayish tinge to his complexion. Okay. But somehow he survives. What he does for entertainment, the only thing the poor fellow can do, is he walks the road there behind his house. But it would be that fate in this particular folk legend would play an ugly card again. Because World War II breaks out. And poor Ray, that little trail that he's walking behind his property there in Compton, the U.S. government needs that land for the prosecution for our war against Germany, because it's full of coal. So those little trails that he walked on gets obliterated. But does anything stop Ray? No. Now he's disfigured, folks. Come on, have a heart. He ain't gonna walk on public daylight in those days. So what's Ray do? He starts to walk the one road he can. 351 New Galilee Road. And he walks it at night. Well, Tony, wait a minute. I think you're forgetting more of the story. How can a man you just told us with two burnt out eyes walk a road? Easy. Ray puts one foot on the road and one on the shoulder. And that's how he walks up and down the road. Now, eventually, okay, people start to notice some of the young people. Remember the people I told you, World War II? Now the kids got the cards, now it's a little bit more fun. They started to see this guy. They stop and they talk to him. And this guy's like little Ray, he's nice enough. So he obliges and he talks to him. Now, most of the kids were nice to Ray, pretty much. Every once in a while, you had some bad eggs that would throw them in the car, take them up the road a couple miles, drop them off, poor Ray would have to walk back. Kids all come to know him. It became like a rite of passage. They called him Charlie No Face. Now, fast forward a folk tale through the 50s, the 60s. Now kids are coming to see this Charlie No Face all the way from Chicago, St. Louis. This is true, folks. I'm not making this up. He gets a following. Some people even start to say, whoa, maybe this isn't right calling Charlie No Face, you know? I mean, it's like, you know, calling somebody that has an amputated leg, oh, hey, Lefty, how you doing? You know, you have no right leg. Okay, so now he starts to wear this hat and this coat. Now, some people, according to the folk legend, believe that sometimes when the headlights hit him, that's why they kind of look green, or he gave this green aura to him. And he'd walk this road all the time in the evening. And the kids that come to see him, and before long, they started to call him the Green Man. Now that's a pretty good tale, wasn't it, folks? I mean, that's a pretty good tale. Well, here's the kicker. That's not just a tale. That's the truth. That man's name was Ray Robinson, and he passed on in 1985. And if you want to, I got my author's copy with me, and I'm almost done here. I'll show you the only picture that I know of Ray Robinson. It was taken from him, taken by his friend when his friend went off in the 60s to Vietnam. It's the only picture that Ray would ever let taken. And the reason why Ray let him take that picture of him was so his friend could tell him that he knew the Green Man to his platoon. And he knew the town of Coppell, and he knew Mercer, and he knew Hermitage. So, good job, guys. You have a real legend that lived by you, okay? All right. Well, folks, I'm probably out of gas and out of time, but it has been my pleasure to talk to you today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you did, please stop by my table. I do have some books.
We've had a little bit of stuff, but once it gets, the weather breaks and they get used to seeing people up there again, I think you're gonna have more activity to where stuff will stick right out to you and not be like, you know what that is, you know? But like even at the Jacobs again, like we were talking, you can always tell. There's always coyotes that go off, but you can always pick that one out that you know that's not a coyote. There's something different about it, whether it's deeper or whether it's more screechier or something, but there's just, people think I'm in town, not, I mean, they got 3,000 people in Gate. They look at you, but not now. When that first all happened, they thought it was, but now they embrace it. They got statues and all that. Yeah, that's the goofball right there, and yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You'll find out a lot. They don't want to say it out, but they're going to leave and they're going to track you down. But I mean, the very first sightings that we had, didn't know what to do with it. You know, it's like, well, what do I do? So somebody said about the BFRO, call and report them. And the two guys came up from there. We got to be pretty good friends with them for quite a while, and then they ended up getting them up that way to film and all that. And that was just a joke. But it was, we've had a lot. I mean, we've met a lot of really nice people up there. Ones that don't think that you're an idiot because you do it. Ones that fit right in with you. And like I said, I encourage you guys, if anybody ever gets the chance to go up there and do it, anything, there's something up there. I mean, if you're into the paranormal, the way that they flooded the reservoir, you know that there's still burials underneath there that are going to make something happen. They even have reports of Kinzu up there. I don't know. I mean, we've seen pictures, and they used to give patches away to Cub Scouts that actually said Kinzu on them and stuff like that. It's that's a weird spot too. But anything else? Any other questions? I'm sitting here not knowing what to say. What was that, about 10 minutes? Daddy's a good friend of ours. Oh yeah, yeah. What's this thing? Strange Kinzu.
Anything about that, or it was a UFO incident where the UFO was in the water, and a guy in Warren wrote an article on it, and of course the men in black showed up and said, "You gotta stop it."
Wasn't that also Denny? Yeah, that was Denny that wrote that one. Yeah, and every time you talk to him, he says, the phone's clicking, we can't talk on the phone. But the weird thing with Denny is, you know, everybody looks at him like, he's a nutcase. But he can back up every one of the stories that he tells you. I mean, everything. Whether
He told us something, that's a little board that literally came up out of the ground, and they have it on a phone. It's just moving in the woods.
he's the one that has the pictures of the Kinzu on it from Jake's Rocks. I mean, you can see it going through the water, and there's a thing up the reservoir, it's called the bowl, the overflow. It's huge. And we were up there the one day. I don't like this story. We looked through and there's bones right here at the very beginning of it. It looked like a mermaid. You might think we're crazy, but I mean, it really did. That place, you just don't know what to expect up in those areas. Not too long ago, we seen a red light we were riding, and it was on a walking trail. And my wife says, well, maybe it's something with a headlamp. No way in heck that's a headlamp coming up through there, and it hasn't been there since, so.
The documentary, I think it's called Lake of Deception. You see President Kennedy standing there at a town meeting or something, and he says, I understand that this situation has been okayed or whatever, and somebody way in the back yells, Supreme Court ruling, and he went on to other things. But it actually, if you watch the trailer, and it shows the Indians being moved out, they built a dam, and it's pretty neat stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Lake of Deception.
Well, there's rumors too that when this all first happened, that you see there was a cave someplace in the reservoir, and you can see where trucks went in, and they heard a bunch of gunshots, and then they come out in a flatbed with something under a blue tarp. You know, you have to believe what goes on there just because of where it's at. Oh yeah, I already told about the drone, what we thought was above us, but right before that, you know how you have like bottle rockets and that, you lay them off, and they have the trails that come behind them, almost like a shooting star? We were seeing them 4 or 5 times prior to seeing that big thing flying over us. We couldn't figure out what it was. That's just another thing that goes on up there.
Did you have any experiences with portals?
We haven't, cool. But our friend, he swears up and down that they're up there. We haven't had it. He says he's lost time. I mean, it's just, he can talk a lot about that. I think that's it. All right, I'm done. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. I always like listening to people I haven't heard before, so that was awesome. Thank you. Now I'm going to look at my little picture here. We don't have the next speaker until 1:45, so you have some time, again, to eat, go to the restroom, mingle, go to the vendors, please. But I'm thinking, since we have a little bit of time here, unless Bill tells me I'm not allowed to do this, I was wondering if there's anybody here that would like to share an experience that they've had. So much anymore. Am I saying that right?
Show some of the vendors, guys. This is my friend Brian and Terry's booth. They run Center for Cryptozoology Studies. They're a research group.
Who are looking into this. So I'm interested, could there be a living, breathing, pooping Bigfoot out?
This is Penn, Ohio Bigfoot researchers. Got some track prints. Cool shirts. It was good. Thank you. So. Good, how about yourself? Good. Don't you guys do like a Halloween horror attraction there too?
Yes.
Like that.
That's Scareman.
Okay, yeah, because I got a YouTube channel I was filming for, and I wanted to reach out and see if I could film a walkthrough the last haunt season. I just really ended up not being able to do it, so maybe this haunt season. Alright, cool. Thank you. My name is William, by the way. Gotcha. I would even like to check out and possibly have them film like a ghost tour too or something. That'd be cool too. Okay. Alright, cool. Thank you very much. You too.
Inspiring people to write books, documentaries, TV shows we all love to watch, and exactly conferences like these that we're in right now. You know, we all have this curiosity. What is this thing? Some of you have had experiences, and you really have that need and want to know. And it's just, the world is so huge for us to think that there isn't these things out there when everybody has experienced, a lot of people have experienced different things and encounters with them, for us not to want to look into it. So give yourselves a hand right now, because everybody's here. We want to know some answers, and we're trying to learn together. So give yourselves a hand.
So, is there a paranormal explanation for Bigfoot? We don't know. I mean, you know, there's two camps in the Bigfoot world, in the community, where one is like they're flesh and blood and nothing else. Then there's those of us, and I'm going to tell you, who here has heard of the word woo? Anybody? Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you the definition, because definitions matter. The definition of woo is believing anything besides flesh and blood makes you woo. In a roundabout way, the reason why they call that, they're kind of calling us crazies. And honest.
We're used to that though, so it's all good.
Yeah, so we are woo. I'm going to own that for sure. Do I believe Bigfoot is 100% paranormal? I don't. And matter of fact, when we look for it, we still treat it as flesh and blood. But in the back of our mind, and I believe this as investigators, that we should leave a place open for the possibilities of something beyond the normal. This is just a quick historical overview of similar creatures of folklore and indigenous cultures worldwide. And we'll just go through this real quick. And again, I know a lot of you guys know this stuff, but we thought we'd just add this in here. Of course, the Yeti. This is from the Himalayas. Large bipedal creature, covered in shaggy hair, also known as the Alma. You have the abominable snowman, not the Alma. The abominable snowman. I got my glasses on. I saw an A.
The Yowie is Australia. It's said to dwell in the dense forest and the rugged terrain of Australia. Description is often depicted as large, hairy humanoid resembling a Bigfoot. I think it's cute. I love his eyebrows. That's just me.
Oh, by the way, I took all these pictures real life. I found these big feet.
Yeah, right. This is, do you want to read about the Alma since you were excited?
Yeah, sure. Being that I brought it up, Oma is from Central Asia, reported to inhabit mountainous regions of Mongolia and two other words that I cannot say. Its description of the Oma is varied, but is often depicted as a wild, hairy humanoid resembling Bigfoot. Next.
The Mapinguari, South America, a mythical creature from Amazonian folklore, particularly among indigenous tribes in Brazil and Peru. Described as a giant sloth-like creature with long claws and has many similarities to a Bigfoot in its elusive nature and has reported sightings in remote jungle areas.
And I think the reason why we brought a lot of these up and we decided to go through this is either we have this long, deep-seated need for a large, hairy man in our lives, or people are actually seeing things. But at the same time, what makes you wonder is you know, and these are just a few examples of things that are throughout the world. And these are a few examples, but I guess, I'm sorry, I lost track of what I was saying. But what I'm, you stumbled me up. But anyway, what it makes me wonder is being that these are worldwide spread creatures, why are we not getting bodies? And this is one of the questions that make me think, could this be something other than a flesh and blood creature?
So we have eyewitness investigations and testimonies that we're going to talk about that we have done in the past couple years. Let's see. So, like you said, is it flesh and blood? You guys, you be the judge. This is in Punxsutawney. This paranormal incident happened. This is our witness. His name is Tyler. He's okay with us sharing his picture and also his story. He's a very off the grid. He's living off the grid. Super nice guy. So here's him in his house. His house is actually. Yeah, I'm gonna have to skip through. We'll talk about it later. But his home it's all powered by solar lights out in the back that he has, the sun shining on, of course. Even his toilet it's a decomposed toilet. So everything he does, he uses the land for what he does. So that's why we're wondering if the reason he's getting these things happening around his area is because there is no electric feeding anywhere. So.
And just like Carrie said, there is no electric, no power. And some people, now this is, not proven by no means, but it used to be that back in the day there was more paranormal phenomenon that people seen, people talk about, all that jazz. And what the thought is, and is that all of our powered machines from our cell phones and things, is it drawing energy from the spirits or whatever you might have to where they cannot manifest to the place where we don't see them like as often or as plentiful as what they used to.
So this is Tyler explaining to Dave. This was on July the 2nd that we met up with him. It was a real rainy day, and so when we met, the story behind it is he went out into the woods. If you look at the other picture with just the woods, up there on the embankment, Years ago, a friend of his and a neighbor had committed suicide, unfortunately, in those woods, and they did not find his body for about a week. And they say that, you know, he still is in those woods, and people have claimed to see his ghost. So Tyler was out with his friends and his girlfriend and him, and they went out just to see what they could see. It was like 11:30 at night. And when they drove down this road and they were like just, you know, taking photos and things, then they started driving down the road, and right here, all of a sudden, his vehicle, when he was driving, his vehicle was stopped, and it was being drug, and you could hear it, and you know, and like all the stones and everything, his vehicle was being drug backwards. And then he put on his gas and started to gun it and try to, you know, get away. He didn't know what was happening, and he ended up going over he like tilted over onto the side here. Did you want to?
Yeah. So anyway, what happened was whenever he was being drugged backwards, it wound up that Tyler looked into a rearview mirror, and what they witnessed was a creature actually holding on to the back end of his vehicle. What the creature did at that point, actually Tyler wound up having a panic attack and he passed out. His vehicle was shoved and pushed over this small embankment where it was sort of teetering there. His buddy was able to get Tyler out of the way and was able to jump into the car and was able to get away at that point. The next day,
So while they were in there, his shocks were ruined. This creature was pushing down and going like this onto his back bumper. So the creature, he thinks, was like positioned like this and like just slamming him down and up and down and up. And he said that you know, his shocks were ruined, and then he tried to and then he fainted, and then his buddy went over and took over. Okay, so go ahead. I just wanted to make sure.
So they left the area after that, and what it wound up, they went back the next day to see if they could find anything. What they did find on the back bumper or the back end of the vehicle was handprints. He explains the handprints as the fingers being about 9 inches long. He also found prints in the ground, which they did photograph everything. But unfortunately, I have none of those photographs to show you. His wife, or ex-wife now, has the photographs, and we've been trying to get them off of her, but don't seem to be working out for us at that point. What makes this really, and this is also the road that this all took place on, and so what makes this interesting is and again, this is where we wind up with, I guess, the woo, because this is where the paranormal phenomenon began after this. This is Tyler's house. You can see again, he's completely off the grid. Even his drinking water comes from a jug. He collects rainwater, puts it in a jug, and that's how they do that. It's a small A-frame house, and they sleep in a loft just above us. And well, you can't see the pictures real well, but right behind me is a step or a ladder that's going up into the loft where they sleep. Wasn't long after this first sighting that he had, is him and his wife was up in the loft sleeping, and what happened is they started through their window they seen a red light. This red light came, well, what they say went right into their house. They didn't realize it until they started seeing red light come up through the floor of the loft. And what it was a big red orb that was, it was kind of like throbbing or like coming in and out type thing.
So right here would be where that orb showed up, right here. This is our son Isaac. He's also a part of our team, and Gavin. And so anyways, this orb showed up right there. So yeah, I said this is our son Isaac and Gavin. They're in a part of our team as well. But right here is where they would have seen it through the crack of the seat, their floor, is this red light, this beating. And he wanted to go out and see, and his girlfriend said no, she was scared because he had other experiences. And he wanted to get down and go see, but he didn't. But then it disappeared. So the next day when they woke up, they went out onto where their solar panels are in the back where their porch is, and there was blood just scattered everywhere, like something shook something real hard, and killed it. And here it was a rabbit. They found rabbit parts and this is very weird and eerie, but they found pieces of a rabbit at each end of their vehicle, one at the front, on each side of their front bumper, one on each side of their back bumper on the ground, right by their tires, laid out, to display. So I don't know if you've ever heard of it, and a lot of you probably have it. There is something called gifting that we believe that Bigfoots will do as well. So we have kind of that spiritual, almost who knows, paranormal light, and then they get up and then they find this.
So during the investigation, again, we went to griddling and wound up, we did smash burgers. They were peanut butter and jelly smash burgers. And if you've never tried one, you got to. They're absolutely delicious. It don't sound right. And I'll tell you real quick how to do one if you want to do one. So first you do the smash burgers. If anybody here know what a smash burger is? Okay, you do them more or less on a griddle, and we wind up smashing them down almost paper thin. They're delicious. They cook up extremely fast. But anyway, first you do the burger, and then you toast the bun real quick, and we use crunchy peanut butter. And what we do on a crunchy peanut butter, you spread it on her while the bun is still toasted up and warm, and then your favorite jelly on the other side.
We call it the peanut butter Bigfoot bumper burger.
Yeah, so that was really good. And again, I was hesitant, but it is absolutely delicious. Anyway.
I'm going to go back to this real quick, just to talk about what happened 3 weeks later. Tyler, his dad lives down the road from him, and he happened to see this creature running down the road, and a vehicle was coming at the same time, and then it just ran into the woods, and the guy stopped and looked at him that was driving, and he said, "Hey, they're like, what was that?" So the guy got out and went in his house and visited with him, and the guy followed this creature for how long?
They said just a couple hundred, I'm not even sure, just say a quarter of a mile down the road. And he was able to keep his car, he was trying to pace himself with the creature, and he said he wound up going about 25 to 30 miles per hour, and the creature stayed right with the vehicle the whole time before it actually entered the woods.
So that happened, and then 3 weeks later, his brother had an experience where he had someone over at his dad's house, and his buddy and him were visiting, and he looked out and he saw some really tall figure. It looked like a man. It was all black. It was dark out, and he said first I need to go backwards. His neighbor had talked with Tyler and his family, and they have a farm, and they have lots of farm cats. And so the neighbor was explaining how she keeps finding her cats and they're mutilated, and she's worried they're coyotes, or she's not sure if wolves are getting them, and she wondered if they were having any problems and if they would just kind of keep an eye out. And so his friend was watching, and his brother watching this film, and they look out and they see this thing in their front porch, and it's kind of scooping down underneath their porch, he said. And he's like, "What in the heck is this guy doing at our house?" And he went to look out, and he realized he saw a cat dart and go underneath his vehicle. So then this guy or whatever it was, he said, went over and he placed his arm, and he realized how big he was at this point. He placed his arm on the hood, and then with the other one he was scooping underneath, and he said, oh my gosh, he's trying to get that cat. So he went and got his gun, and he ran out to like shoot this thing, or just get it away. And as he did that, he was pointing the gun at it, and his friend couldn't even speak. That was with him. He was behind him, and then finally he said, "Just shoot it, just shoot it." And then he went and the thing just got away. He said it took 3 steps and it was gone. So I thought that was very interesting. And the way these cats are being found is, this is pretty disgusting, honestly. But they're taking the tail and the head and just pulling it apart, So, and that's what their neighbor was concerned, because she's like, I mean, some of the insides are missing and stuff, but it's just weird how they're mutilated.
So that brings us to the next one that we've worked on, and this is me and Carrie, and I know even Brian Seach. We've all witnessed something in this area. We spent some time up on the rock and mountain of Clearfield. We were up there with several investigators, well, the reason, I'm going to tell you what brought us up the rock and mountain first. First, it's pretty handy to my place. Second was a lot of sightings, historical sightings took place there. The last one, the most latest one, I believe it happened back in the 90s, was there was a man, 2 hunters, and what they witnessed was 2 Sasquatches, one adult and one juvenile, go across this petroleum line. And that's what brought us up there. So what we did and how it all started out was we went up as a group, and we started looking into the sighting and things, and what we started having happen to us was at night, somewhere in our neighborhood of midnight or so, we'd have things thrown at us. Quite often. It happened for about 2 or 3 weekends, and these projectiles were coming through the top of the trees, and you could tell that it was shooting out across, at a horizontal type projectile, and you could hear it coming through the top of the trees. That would hit what was behind us was this old fence, and it would actually, some of the stuff that was thrown at us was hitting that fence back there. We did it happened to us so much that the one investigator that was with us started wearing a hard hat whenever he came out. So it was kind of funny. But I'll let Carrie go ahead.
The reason we're revisiting, the Clearfield Mountain and the Rockton area is because there's a lot of weird things going on in the sky, and also different orbs and things we're going to explain to you. But we're just trying to show like this side of it. Like, how do we know it's not? It is just flesh and blood. So that's the reason we're revisiting Rockton Mountain, because there's been so many sightings.
So not just did we have the things thrown at us, but on the picture towards us there, you can see a small pine tree. On Rockton Mountain, there's these weird clearings, and I don't even know what they're for, but you'll find them every now and again. And they're small fields, like in the middle of what would essentially be surrounded by pines. But right down the center of this one was a row of pine trees about this high. And the most interesting, this is not a very good picture, but what we found was when we looked at these and examined these pine trees, that the tops of them, about 10 inches, was broken down and twisted on it, and they were just left there, the whole row of those pine trees. When we closely examined it, we did find what we were calling hair samples. What hair it was, I don't know. We did collect them the best to our knowledge of how to do it, and using the envelope, the gloves, and all that kind of stuff like that. We had them sent in and they were microscopically analyzed. And what they came back as is inconclusive. Then the hair samples disappeared after that. We never saw them again. But we got the answer back of inconclusive was the only thing that we had. Down in this bottom also, we also had another group come down and visit it. They camped down there. They set up camp down there, and they actually had interactions with something, some kind of creature. And whenever they explained it to us, it was skinny, lanky, real tall, but lanky, and not your typical Bigfoot where you hear about them with a large muscular build and things. This was more of a lanky thing. It messed with them as far as like they doused out their fire and moved all the logs off of it or the wood off of it. And it wound up that whatever was visiting them restarted the fire, bringing the logs back in on it. It was just circling their tent type things. And it wound up that night, they called me in the middle of the night and asked me to come down to see what's going on. I went down and they would never set foot back. They never wanted to go back into those woods again. It just scared them that much. Although, about a year ago, they did go back down in there with me.
Also, in this area, in the newspaper article that I showed earlier explains this. There is little lights, balls of light, right at the bottom. This is David. His mom was out with us. That's his mom. But anyhow, right down here, balls of light that were just like streaming over and darting over, which we had, a priest out with us, and he couldn't explain that. He said that just feels like it should be spiritual, like. And then when we were out with a bunch of groups, we all went down into the same bottom. I don't know what's going on with this area, but a huge flash of light just like lit up the entire sky, and it was like, whoa, it was almost like a bomb went off. And it was very quiet, and it was just very eerie. And the other thing that happened is we took out a friend of ours, and we were, just checking out the area, hiking, and then that night we went up, we were on the top of, on the top of the hill, that leads to this, and we were doing calls and just kind of like, listening, seeing if we could get anything on film, and all of a sudden we heard little children playing. There was it sounded like there was 3 or 4 kids running around the bottom there and chasing each other, and they're just having a grand old time. And I'm like, it is like 1 a.m. and we're in the middle of, the forest of Black Moshannon. There is no way that there's kids out here playing, there's no place nearby, no cabins. So that tells me, again, it steers me to spiritual, and then also going to the other part of the woo, it would be alien, because we've also had witnesses take us up here, and we did filming at the time. It's in Mountain Devil 1, if you ever want to watch it. But we saw a pendulum, a figure 8, all kinds of things happening in the sky. There's a huge light in the sky doing all kinds of things.
Yeah, this again, there was about 11 of us, I believe, out there. Brian was with us that night. We were on the same petroleum line or the gas line that was cut through this forest, and what we started to witness was this ball of light, and it was changing colors from red, yellow. I believe it went into blues at some point, and it was above us, right in the middle of this power line. And I remember the first person that saw it said, "You guys seeing what I'm seeing?" And so we kind of all looked up, we saw it, and then all of a sudden we all witnessed it starting to do different motions from, just like Carrie said, it started going into figure 8s. Then it started just doing a pendulum thing. And these were not small movements, they were large, where you could literally see this thing moving around. Then after a while, after it did all these movements, what it did was like it was coming at us. And at one point, I swear to God, it was going to hit you. But then all of a sudden it would stop and it sucked back in. It just sucked back in and then just disappeared. I don't believe we ever saw it again after that. The reason why we're drawing parallels with this and trying to connect it to the Bigfoot phenomenon is that this is all happening at the same time. When all the stuff was happening with what we felt. Okay, let's go. Yeah. Well, how you felt when you got out of the vehicles up there, you knew something was off, something was different. Every time we did, you could feel that. Now, are we feeding off each other? That's a possibility, but every time you got out, you just felt something heavy. And what happened was, the way it wound up being, eventually, even when we revisited just this winter we was up there, you don't feel that no more. You get out, it's light. They wound up cutting a lot of trees down up there. They changed it quite a bit. So whatever it was, I believe, did move on, because you don't get that feeling no more. There's just none of that anymore.
We just explained everything on this slide. The last slide I was showing you is there's a deer carcass there. And we have had coyote pups that had chased you in the past. And also we've seen bear cubs that we all were like, oh, there's cubs, oh boy, we better hurry up. So, I mean, there's tons of wildlife, but there was a deer carcass here and we never really found, that's another thing we'll talk about. We only have 7 minutes, so that's why I'm trying to...
Oh, we only have 7, but we talked that long, and nobody left. Wow.
Yeah.
But, one of the things we just kind of went through here real quick, and again, we're not knocking nobody, not claiming anything, but one of the things that makes you question is, is it flesh and blood? Because we don't have a body. Honestly, most of our evidence is circumstantial. I mean, even the footprints that we're getting, unless, even if you have the dermal ridges and all that jazz like that, it tells us literally nothing other than the possibility of the existence of a creature. That's really all it's telling us. So how can, without a body, could we claim one way or the other? I think as investigators, we really do have to keep our mind open. And as a joke, really, just for us to believe in Bigfoot, why not go a little bit further? We already jumped into the pool.
Exactly. So we believe that while we do not definitively have evidence that Bigfoot exists, nor do we have definitive evidence that the paranormal even exists, belief in Bigfoot and the paranormal can be justified by video, circumstantial, and testimonial evidence. We cannot show you definitive evidence that either Bigfoot or the paranormal exists, nor can any other believing researcher definitively prove that Bigfoot exists or that the paranormal even exists, and neither can any of us. So my son is a philosophy major, and so he's trying to help us to how can we get this message out to everyone. And so that's even a little over my head, but that was his part. So if you believe in both Bigfoot and you believe in the existence of the paranormal, therefore to rule out the possibilities that Bigfoot could be paranormal is to spin in the face of your own dogma. Yep. Do we have any questions or comments?
Just don't ask us what dogma means. So I guess at this point,
I thought you knew, that's why I wasn't going to ask.
No, I don't know. Anyway.
I'll have to ask him tonight.
We'll look it up. Anyway, so any questions? I guess at this point we'll take questions if anybody has.
We have 3 minutes for questions or any comments or anything.
All right. Well, that's good. That means we covered it all right. Oh, no, never mind.
How about the government conspiracy theories where there is undeniable proof of Bigfoot and bodies and the government's covered it up to protect the logging industry?
For sure. I've thought about that. I mean, I do believe that there is proof out there. What I was saying is we don't have it to show anyone. Without a body, without something to actually examine, to feel it. And get me, I know a lot of you, some of you people have seen something. I've never seen one. And, you know, at that point, you have this true belief, you know, and I get it. But for us that have not had an opportunity to witness something like this, you know, we still have to think of, what could be, for sure. I mean, because everything we do, we're going off of eyewitness testimony. Everything we do. So why rule out over half of those eyewitness testimonies that say, you know, I believe this thing's paranormal? I mean, and you know, some people call it a cop-out. You know, we're finding an easy way to explain it by saying it's paranormal. And okay, I can see what your argument is there, but can you explain to me why, and we've seen this, where footprints go out in the middle of a field, then all of a sudden disappear. And the only way to say otherwise is that Bigfoot backtracked perfectly the whole way back through there. Where does he go? Could it be interdimensional? It's all possible.
Even Tyler, you know, with his encounter he did have prints that they did get prints that went up in that little bit of you know, like a little area coming off the hill there. But other than that, you know, and they were teenagers. He didn't know how to cast a track. But one thing I think is very interesting is we were doing a Cancer Society event, and we were speaking at it. And a friend of mine was sitting in the audience, and after it was over, she said, "Carrie, I got to tell you something. The kid that was with Tyler was my son. And he came home so scared that night, he won't let his dad and I go hunting out there anymore because he was so frightened. He's the guy that jumped in the front seat and took off and took over driving. And his name is Zeke." And she's like, "I can't believe when you're telling that story up there in front of everybody." I'm like, "That was my boy Zeke. That was the one who got freaked out." So that was pretty amazing to, you know, make that connection with her.
And I know we got to get off, but one last thing I just want to go back to what I said to begin with is we're not knocking nobody for their beliefs. We have our beliefs. And I know a lot of you guys have your beliefs. And we're not trying to prove nothing. We're just giving an explanation of why do we look at things the way we look at things. And why would it be wrong to try it any other way? Try to put in some of the paranormal investigative techniques into actually trying. I know Brian and Terry, I know Jamie and Jenny, they do a lot of different techniques that nobody else really thinks about. You know, you know, how can we communicate or even evoke some kind of response by using a different type of technique besides mainstream or the flesh and blood. Believe me, I want it to be even flesh and blood. I still treat it as, because if it's not flesh and blood, we're in a lot of trouble. We ain't gonna be able to prove nothing. So, yeah, so that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, everybody.
The guy on the spot, I'm not going to lie to you. Interesting to note, Enoch is in fact the grandfather of Noah. And so what this means, and this is something that I just came upon recently, is that the Nephilim are on the earth. They're on the earth from the time of Enoch, which was around 622 to 987, to the flood that would happen later on, 1656. Now these numbers obviously are biblical numbers, so you got to take it with that when you're reading into this stuff. But that's 1,000 years, roughly. 1,000 years of these beings on Earth. So they weren't wiped away right off, like a lot of people have thought. They were there for a time. So, and people age different. It's interesting to know that if you take the ages of the biblical forefathers and you compare them pre-flood to post-flood, you'll notice that there's a striking age difference, but there's also the Sumerian Kings list, and I don't know how many of you know what that is, but it's very similar in regards to there was a point where a flood happens, and then people started living shorter lifespans. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls, they actually contain a very interesting text known as the Book of the Giants, and it tells of a group, Oya and Haya, and they are having dreams. They're having these vivid dreams of symbolic flooding. And so they go to Enoch, and they say, "Enoch, we need to understand what's God trying to tell us." Well, he's trying to tell you that you're going to be wiped out, and that your fathers, the Watchers, are going to be imprisoned until Judgment Day. And so there's nothing they can do. The interesting point here that I want to make, if anybody here has actually read the Book of the Giants, the hero Gilgamesh is actually in the Book of the Giants, sort of connecting biblical to Sumerian folklore. And I thought that was always really cool. When I had read that, I was like, oh, that's very interesting. And if we go to Numbers 13:33, it goes on to describe what are known as the Anakim, being from the same line as the Nephilim. Now, the Nephilim were wiped out. So I had to kind of understand how they would be descendants. But there is a passage that says, and the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and after. So somehow they have survived the great flood. But yes, and then on the left here we have David slaying Goliath by, once again, Gustav Doré. Now, Anak is the Hebrew word for giant, and they are known as the Anakim, or the Anakites. And they were a warlike tribe, people discussed in Deuteronomy 2:10, and they inhabit the lands of southern Israel. Now, what you're going to notice in a lot of giant folklore, they're very warlike. When we later on talk about the Native Americans and giants, the red-haired giants were seen as being cannibals, and they fought against a black-haired giant race. Very fascinating stuff when you get into it. Anak has 3 sons that were driven out of Canaan, and that would be Shishai, Imon, and Talmai. And all 3 of these giants had great stature like their father. So here are these just beings that are walking around, 10, 15 feet tall. And their greatest warrior was named Arba, and he is the father of Anak. So he is like the progenitor of the giant race. And in Joshua 14:15, it describes him as the greatest man. Now, outside of the Old Testament, it's kind of hard to find information about Arba, but there is a city that they find, Karath Arba, which was named after him, and then there's Kiryat Arba, but that one isn't known, and that one still exists today. That is, you see here, that is east of Hebron. So if you guys are familiar with Israel, you guys probably know where Hebron is. Now, in Islamic tradition, because Islam and Judaism at points in the belief system mirror each other. It's part of the Abrahamic faiths. And so Anak bint Adam, meaning Adam's daughter Anak, is thought to be the mother of Ush. Now, Ush is the Islamic version of King Og. And I have discussed King Og in previous presentations, but he was also a giant whose bed, I believe they had that, the bed was measured to be about 13 feet. So his bed was 13 feet long. And so he's the king from Deuteronomy, Numbers, and Joshua. And here pictured on the left is Ush, known as Og in Judaism. So I wanted to go, for a lot of my presentations, I was kind of sticking in the Middle East. I was kind of breaking down a lot of things in the Middle East. And I said to myself, we need to go other places. We need to go in other parts of the world to see if what we're studying here in the Middle East is in fact linked or mirrored or happens in South America or Mexico. And here we have the Aztec flood. Located in Cholula, Mexico are the remains of a once great pyramid that was 4 times larger than the Egyptian pyramid of Cheops. Now, for 4,800 years after the creation of the world, the land of Anahuac, and I apologize if I butcher these, some of these are like, they're a little rough to get up, but it was inhabited by a race of giants, much like the Nephilim. And they were both enemies of God and man, much like the Nephilim were in the Old Testament and the book of Enoch. The worst of these giants is a giant by the name of Zalhua. Zalhua has 6 brothers, and each brother is just as evil and as wicked as Zalhua. The gods decided they're tired of this guy. They're tired of him making a mess. They're tired of him running rampant, being a goof. So what they decide to do is they decide to remove them via a flood. Well, him and his brothers decide, we're not going to do that. So as the flood is coming, they begin to climb Mount Talak. And they hide in caves, and they take big old boulders, and they roll them in front of the cave opening so the water can't get in. and they live. And so Zahua decides, you know what? I am going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to build a pyramid. He builds this pyramid with the help of people he created using secret arts. What those arts were, I could not begin to tell you. The gods, they're insulted by this. And if anybody knows about Aztec gods or Mayan gods or Incan gods, they're very much like Greek gods. They do their own thing. They're not as loving towards human beings as in Christianity or as in any of the other Abrahamic faiths. They don't much care for people, but they kind of leave them alone a little bit unless they want to mess with them. So he builds this pyramid, or he starts to build this pyramid, and he gets all the way up as high as the clouds. But the gods are patient, and they will wait. And so as soon as he builds it up high enough, they send a flaming meteor from the sky to hit the pyramid. It kills Zahua instantly and the workers around it and destroys the pyramid. And from that point on, the gods do not allow a structure like that to be built. Now, what is this reminiscent of? The Tower of Babel. Same basic concept. And people are actually split up after this and end up speaking different languages. So we're having a mirroring of belief systems here. So I find that to be very fascinating. And on the left here is a picture of the main courtyard that was taken by Alejandro Henares Garcia. Now, we're going to get into the Incan city of the unruly giants. The Inca Empire started in 1200 AD with the settling of Cusco Valley in what would be modern-day Peru. The empire ends in 1533 AD with the execution of Atahualpa and the invasion of the Spanish Empire into Cusco. Because remember, the conquistadors came in and they destroyed everything and took everything and went back home. But the Incan creator god Viracocha creates a city around Lake Titicaca for a race of giants to dwell in. These giants become unruly and lazy. And once again, we're seeing shades of the Nephilim. You know, the Nephilim, they became cannibals. They were devouring everything. You figure a being that's 11,250 feet is going to be quite hungry. And a small hamburger or a small hot dog is not going to satiate his needs. So they begin eating everything and eating people. And so here, another flood. We're going to send another flood to wipe them out. But this time the giants are turned to stone. The flood event itself is called Unu Pachacuti, and its translation could mean the revolution. Now, after the waters recede, Viracocha took smaller stones and created 2 human beings from them. And the image on the left is the Incan creator god and bringer of the flood, Viracocha. Now, how many here know about giants and Native Americans? Okay, excellent. This part, to me, was one of the most fascinating aspects of the research that I have done on this presentation, because I always enjoy reading about Native Americans and their interactions with things like giants or things like Bigfoot. And that always fascinates me, that they have sort of this relationship with these beings. And so just some of the things we're going to talk about here, the Choctaw, the giant-nosed Black Panther, Tuscaloosa, the Comanche, and the native Peruvians. And on the left here, and I talked about this in a previous presentation, the Patagonian giants. Okay, so Indian tales of white giants. Now, if we read about Native Americans and giants, a lot of times they deal with these white giants, and they talk about there being a different, rich, powerful, more so than the Europeans that had came over. Same skin tone and everything else, which is a very interesting note. But the Choctaw are a Native American people that come from Alabama and Mississippi, and today they are part of 3 federally recognized tribes. Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Louisiana are the locations of these 3 tribes, and they were first noted by Europeans in 1675. Now, the Choctaw talk of white giants they named Nahulo. These giants had a wonderful stature. The Choctaw end up coming into contact with these Nahulo upon crossing the Mississippi. Now, the Nahulo inhabited what is now Tennessee. So once again, they are thought to be cannibals. A lot of the giants that Native Americans come across, not all of them, are cannibals. And so they say, you know what? We need to kill these guys. So they go every opportunity, every time they see one, they go after them. And they end up killing a large majority of them. Oh, I'm sorry. And on the left, we have a Choctaw stickball player. Now, this was something that I found to be utterly fascinating. In 1540, Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto and his team are exploring what would later be known as the southeastern United States. And they're resting in a destroyed village. They're kind of getting themselves back together, and all of a sudden they hear a rustling in the trees, and they hear a rustling on the ground, and looking to see what it is, this giant of a man comes out toward them. Now, little do they know that he knows that they have been raiding Native American villages, and they've been killing and they've been looting, but he doesn't let them know that he knows that. So he's setting them up for a trap. So he says, come back with me to the village. We're going to have a feast. And so DeSoto and his men, they are a little leery about this. And so they say, okay, and they head back. Now, Rodrigo Rangel, DeSoto's personal secretary, is quoted as saying the following: seeing him, we paused with dumb amazement. A great-limbed giant, the heads of our tallest men reached only to his breast. So we're talking, they're right here. He is a very large Native American person. So he invites DeSoto's men, like I said previous, back to this feast. So the army descend and they say, you know, we need to eat, we're hungry, let's go ahead and do that. It would take DeSoto and his men, with Black Panther leading them, 3 days before they would actually reach their destination. And upon entering the tribal capital of Mobila, DeSoto and his men were struck with awe. They saw a large city complex with large logs tied together with massive vines. On the left here we have none other than Hernando de Soto himself. Now, Chief Tuscaloosa is the father of Black Panther. So you can imagine if the son's tall, the father's going to be taller. So after his men arrive in Mobila with Black Panther, he takes them to meet his father. His father is this great giant Indian chieftain, and he's sitting on a tall mound surrounded by 100 other Native Americans, and they're protecting him from every single angle. A giant mightier than his son, with big bones, sinewy limbs, like a gnarled leafless tree, high up he towered, was a quote regarding Tuscaloosa. DeSoto and his men, they eat and drink inside a feast hall. Now at one point they start noticing that the women and the children are getting up and leaving. And they think to themselves, okay, this is a little odd. And they start looking out and they start seeing arrows being pointed at them. And so now they know that it's a trap. Right in the middle, it's about to go down. So they escape. They come back, they end up killing 2,000 warriors, and they behead Black Panther. They never find Chief Tuscaloosa. And they go out to raid villages to look for this giant of a man, but they never find him. And on the left, we have Native American chieftain, Tuscaloosa. The Comanche. This is one of my favorite Native American tribes, having researched them kind of lately. I just got into them not too long ago, and I kind of did a deep dive into them, and I find them to be a very fascinating tribe. Now, the leader of the Comanche describes 10-foot tall, once again, white giants. Now, the Comanche were a tribe of nomads who roamed the southern Great Plains, and the word Comanche comes from the Ute, I hope I said that right. If I didn't, by all means, please correct me. Word meaning anyone who wants to fight me all the time. It's a very interesting definition. They were also the first tribe to acquire horses from the Spanish and breed them, thus becoming an equestrian nomadic tribe. The chief recounts a tale involving a race of rich white giants, and he's quoted as saying, innumerable moons ago, a race of white men, 10 feet high, and far more rich and powerful than any white people now living, They excelled in every other nation which was flourished either before or since. In all manner of cunning handicraft, were brave and warlike, ruling over the land. On the left here we have Comanche Chief Quanah Parker. Now let's get into the native Peruvians and their tales of strange giants arriving on their shores. Pedro de Ciza de Leon was a Spanish conquistador and chronicler who wrote a series of historical accounts about Peru titled The Chronicles of Peru. It is written in essentially 4 parts. I read some of it for researching this presentation. And in the first part of the Chronicles, chapter LII, which is Roman numeral 52, Pedro recounts a tale regarding giants who actually land in Peru and were witnessed by the natives. The natives tell Pedro the following. There arrived on the coast in boats made of reeds as big as large ships, a party of men such size that from knee downwards their height was as great as the entire height of an ordinary man, though he might be of good stature. Their limbs were all in proportion to the deformed size of their bodies. And it was a monstrous thing to see their heads, with hair reaching to their shoulders. Their eyes were as large as small plates. Now, I think sometimes when you have these tales, I think there is some slight exaggerations, especially when you see a race of people you've never seen before. So you're seeing these giants, and you're going to kind of exaggerate a little bit, just to kind of, put a little bit of razzle-dazzle, as it were, into your stories. Now we're going to get into some of the tombs of the giants, which some of these are really fascinating, and I hope you folks, when you leave here, have a little read about them. The Nabi Habil Mosque, Iran with the Pillars, of course Pennsylvania, because I'm in Pennsylvania. I like to at least do a mound or two that I hear. Ohio, which is where I'm from, is the land of the mounds. We have quite a few. And West Virginia's female giants. Pictured here on the left is the sarcophagus of Habil or Abel in Judaic and Christian beliefs, and it's taken by Toshiro. Now, located in Balad Ash-Sham in Syria is the supposed burial place of the Islamic prophet Habil. But in Judaism, we all know him as Cain's brother, Abel. Now, Masjid an-Nabi Habil of the Mosque of the Prophet Abel is a shrine that's dedicated to Habil, and it's located in the Zabadani Valley in Syria. Now, in Islam, some Muslims believe that his size was gigantic due in large part to him being what would be known as a world builder. His father, they put him at 30 feet. In some accounts that I've read about Islam and Abel, he sits about 30 feet, but his dad, Adam, is like 90 feet. So, but this is, once again, this is like via hadiths. Hadiths are basically supplemental writings to the Quran itself. So a lot of the hadiths tell different aspects of the Quran. Now, inside Nabi Habil is a 23-foot long sarcophagus inscribed with verses from the Quran. And on the left here we have the Nabi Habil Mosque. Now, I have been studying Iran with the Pillars for a very long time. I have kind of pinpointed the location of where it could be. There's a place in Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Oman called the Empty Quarter. It's a vast desert. But through having researched a lot of the Quran, these hadiths, other tales, the Ebla tablets, I believe it sits more further in Oman than it does in Saudi Arabia. But in Islamic folklore, Iram is a tale regarding a lost city where giants once lived. And it would also be their tomb. In the Quran, Surah Al-Fajr, or known as the Dawn, 89 verses 6 through 8 state the following. Did you not see how your Lord dealt with Ad, the people of Iram, with their great stature unmatched in any other land? So the legend goes that once glorious king named Shaddad Banat built a glorious city, but he became greedy and he wanted more and more. And if you read about Shaddad Banat, it said he had conquered, he did a Genghis Khan, basically. He conquered a large chunk of our well-known world. So the prophet Hud comes into the city and says, please, you have to cease this. Allah will get angry with you and he will destroy the city. Very reminiscent of Sodom and Gomorrah from the Old Testament. And so King Shaddad, as in many folk tales, doesn't heed these warnings because he says, he's a king. He thinks of himself as a god. He's a giant of a man and he doesn't have to worry about that. Well, a sandstorm is unleashed for 8 days and it buries the city in the location being the empty quarter. An interesting legend also regarding Shaddad Benat is that he's the one who built the pyramids at Giza to hold his fortune when the flood came. It is thought that the Nabateans, the ones that built Petra in Jordan, and the Ad are from the same tribe, and when they had split, one went south, the other went west, northwest, and out to other areas of the Middle East. The Ebla tablets, which are a collection of clay tablets and fragments, mention Iram of the Pillars several times throughout. Now, how many people here are familiar with Finleyville? Does anybody know where Finleyville is? How far is that from here, if anybody knows? A couple hours? Okay. This is taken from September 14th, the edition of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette in 1932. A group of men dig up giant bones near Finleyville, Pennsylvania. Archaeologist G.S. Fisher finds 45 skeletons of giant bones in a hill overlooking El Rama. Now, I guess El Rama is close to Finleyville. I looked it up and it was like 10 miles out from Finleyville. I'm not very familiar with the area, so I apologize. But he digs up these bones in a mound related to giants who roamed the forest of Pennsylvania some 10,000 years ago. And Fisher says he uncovered more mounds located close to where the giant skeletons were in fact found. One of the skeletons that Fisher uncovered was 7 feet tall. And so pictured on the left here, we have the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette article regarding those bones that were dug up in 1932. Now, Ohio, how many people here have been to the Great Serpent Mound? I love it. It's an experience unlike any other. You know, you go there and you're like, who did they build this for? You know, it reminds me a lot of the Nazca Lines. If a lot of you are familiar with the Nazca Lines, you're looking down at this. You're looking down at these things. And it just fascinates me to no end. Now, Ohio has more than 70 Native American burial mounds from both the Adena and the Hopewell tribes. And some of these mounds have held jewelry, armor, and even giant skeletons. And this is from the Wichita Daily Eagle, dated November 17th, 1891. Dr. Warren Moorhead and Dr. Cresson have opened up the most interesting prehistoric relic. They exhumed the massive skeleton of a man encased in copper armor from a long mound. The discoverers think they have found the king and queen of the mound builders. The king and the queen. Les Odell, I know a lot of you here know who Les is. We talked about that on his podcast on Thursday and had a really good in-depth discussion regarding the king and the queen of the mound builders. 3 giant skeletons were then found beyond the city limits of Toledo, Ohio, which is to the west. It's like the upper west of Toledo, or the upper west of Ohio. Unearthed 3 skeletons, evidently relics of some great race, as they were about 7 feet in length. Just where the ears should be on the head are singular bony protuberances which curl forward. Horns, if you will. The cut is through a large mound, not half of which has yet been torn up. So they find these skeletons that have horns. Okay. There's a couple other, if anybody's ever seen the statue, they have a statue of Moses, and it looks like he has horns as well. Not devil horns, mind you, just little bony protuberances right here on top of his head. It's a very interesting statue. Now, in Muskingum County, Ohio, the Brush Creek Township, a tablet is found alongside skeletons measuring over 8 and 9 feet in length. And it goes on to say that the Brush Creek Mound is situated on the summit of a hill rising 152 feet above the bed of the stream called Brush Creek. It's about 64 feet in width by about 90 feet in length, and having an altitude of 11 feet. When it was resumed by opening the mound from the northwest, we came upon two enormous giant skeletons, male and female, lying one above the other, faces together and heads toward the west. The male by actual measurement proved to be 9 feet 6 inches, and the female was 8 feet 9 inches in length. And the left here is the famous Great Serpent Mound in Athens, Ohio. Now, how many people here are familiar with Grave Creek Mound in West Virginia, or Moundsville? Yep. I'm actually headed out there probably this summer because I haven't been to Moundsville yet, and I'm going to be doing some copious amount regarding mounds. I've been to a few. I've been to the one in Charleston, which is fascinating. It's very interesting. You're going into Charleston, South Charleston, and you take a turn and it's right there. And around it is like an antique store and a place that sells boba tea. And it's just like, it's a weird contrast, but I think it's really cool. So Grave Creek Mound is located in Moundsville, West Virginia, and is considered one of the largest Adena mounds. The mound itself was built around 250 BC to 150 BC. While Grave Creek Mound is an isolated piece of history in the area, it was at one point surrounded by mounds of varying sizes. This is from the Charleston Daily Mail, dated October 22nd, 1922. It says, in Grave Creek Mound, a female skeleton that measured 7 feet 4 inches was excavated, along with a male skeleton measuring 8 feet. There was also mention of a jawbone that was found that was said to fit over the face of a local resident. So imagine that, just putting a whole skull over top of your head and being like, this is a pretty big skull. Now, picture on the left, we have Grave Creek Mound by Amanda Vaughn. And she got that from Your Guide to History, October 1st, 2020. Now, how many people here are familiar with the Smithsonian and their role in giant skeletons? I agree, 100%. Not a big fan of the Smithsonian. So, as you can tell, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Smithsonian. The missing pieces, as I like to call it, in all of this. We're going to go over a brief history, where did they take the giant bones to, and a man that I do not care for named Els Hardlicka. And we're going to get into him, and he's not a good person. Not a good person at all. So here's a brief history of the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian is founded after funding from James Smithson. However, James Smithson was dead, and posthumously the money was donated, and the Smithsonian is born. It's established it was established by the 11th President of the United States, one James K. Polk, on August 10th, 1846. The Smithsonian itself operates 19 museums as well as a zoological park. The museums are located in DC, Maryland, New York City, and Virginia. I have been to their, what would be the Space Museum in, I believe it's DC, because they have a couple different ones too. So, rockets, art portraits, insects, and more are housed in the Smithsonian. And on the left is a statue of James Smithson taken by photographer C.E. Holmes. Now, the Weekly Democratic Statesman, Austin, Texas, from April 12, 1883, page 6, talk about the Smithsonian taking artifacts from a Bristol, Tennessee mound named Back Creek. Mr. John W. Emmerich, employed by the Bureau of Ethnology of the Smithsonian Institute at Washington, has lately explored a mound at Bristol, Tennessee, and he secured some interesting and valuable Indian relics. Among other things in the mound was found the skeleton of a gigantic Indian. Once again, the Smithsonian smells out these skeletons. A lot of the times when they find giant skeletons after the Smithsonian is found, the Smithsonian shows up. There's always a representative. And at other times, there are people that donate the giant skeletons to the Smithsonian. From the Spokane Daily Chronicle, dated June 21st, 1933, page 35, says the following. A search for locations for study by members of the Smithsonian Institution disclosed from 15 to 20 of the skeletons in a grave on a mound at Lart Lake. Once again, the Smithsonian. The Salt Lake Tribune, dated June 7th of 1908, talk of finding the tallest human giant that ever lived. Now, this one they think was a hoax. They said it was a hoax, but there's something that doesn't add up here. The tallest human giant who ever lived was being shown at the Atlantic Exposition, while a number of these Smithsonian scientists were there. The exhibitor agreed to sell it for $500 to the Smithsonian, which dispatched Mr. Lucas to the scene with Professor W.J. McGee. The Smithsonian claims it's a hoax, but interestingly enough, they were interested in getting the thing back to the Smithsonian. They said they had took a piece of the skin and that the skin was in fact gelatin. The initial discovery of the mummy itself was in 1895, but it wasn't tested until 1908. Why are you waiting so long to test it? Unless they didn't have the correct means to test it at the time. But one Els Hardlicka joins the Smithsonian in 1903. And pictured on the left is the world's tallest giant, with the discoverer on the left and W.J. McGee on the right. This guy looks like Charles Bronson, but definitely not as cool as Charles Bronson. This is one Els Hardlicka, who was born on March 30th, 1660. I messed this up. I'm sorry. March 30th in Austria-Hungary. I think I got that date wrong, so I apologize for that, because he would be much older than that. In 1903, Els becomes the assistant curator of physical anthropology collections at the Smithsonian Institution, and he would go on to become the curator in 1910. Hardlicka received a stolen Indian skull from Captain Newton Chittenden, who was an archaeologist, who donates it to the Smithsonian, and when presented with the skull, he said it surpassed, I think the Smithsonian's trying to silence me now, any previously in the institution. He was once quoted as saying, "If you ever find evidence of human life in context which is ancient, bury it carefully, but do not forget about it." He covers up these giant skeletons because of his views on the inferiority of races. He believed, as an ethnologist, that other races other than his own were in fact inferior, and he goes on to call Native Americans lazy. He believes that if you have a bigger cranium, then you have a bigger brain and you're more intelligent. Now, obviously, that was proven to not be true, but at the time, he believes this. He believes that if you have a large head, that your brain must be massive. You must be the most intelligent person. And he didn't believe that any other races were intelligent, but his own. And so, he believes that the cranial size is thought to equate to higher intelligence. Obviously, he was wrong, because as that person is. So, just some thank yous. I want to thank Bill Rigby and the entire Penn Ohio Conference staff. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Leah Carpenter and WV Fantasy Works. The stickers over there are drawn by her, hand-drawn, very talented artist.
2011 and 2012, I came to find some very fascinating pieces of information. That information was that at one time, Earth was comprised of one fully connected continent known as Pangaea. There was also one ocean, which was known as Panthalassa. The heating and the cooling of the layer underneath Earth's crust, known as the mantle, along with tectonic plate movement, was responsible for this massive shift of the Earth. When the single continent of Pangaea broke apart, new land masses and new oceans were created. When looking at the Earth as a whole on a map, you can see that pieces of current continents could fit into other ones. At one point, and which can be visibly seen, the eastern portion of South America could fit into Africa's west coast, because that is where it was before it was separated by the movement and motion of the tectonic shifting of the plates. When I first came to understand the magnitude of this, I believe that it was then that I came to understand the substantial power and energy of Earth itself, even without our presence, of course. At that time, I retained my interest in Earth, but had not yet studied into ley lines. The Earth that we call home is comprised of 4 layers that's known as the crust, the mantle, the inner core, and the outer core. This is basic information that we learned through years of schooling, but we tend to subsequently dismiss that information as we settle into common life. The first layer is the crust, which is also referred to as the lithosphere. This is the layer that we see, and it is where we stand or swim. The crust is not a simple earthen layer, though. Instead, it's comprised of about 15 to 20 tectonic plates that are constantly in motion. Tectonic plates are massive slabs of rock that are irregularly shaped. The size and width varies. Their composition is made up of a lightweight material which aids in their ability for movement. The material can be of granite rock along with quartz and feldspar materials. The motions of these plates are caused by various other influences, including activity within the mantle, interactions with the ocean crust, the rotation of the planet, and radioactive processes within the planet. Sometimes the plates move towards each other, while at other times the plates move away from each other. The second layer of Earth is the mantle, which is located below the crust. The mantle is denser and not as solidly formed. In this section, there is constant movement of rocks, rising and sinking due to heat from the core. Some parts of the mantle are comprised of rocks that have been completely melted, and which results in hot and liquid rock that is known as magma. If the magma reaches the surface into the crust, then that is when it becomes what is referred to as lava from volcanic eruptions. The movement in this area is referred to as convective currents, which is alleged to be the rock upheaval in the mantle, where hot rocks rise and cooler rocks fall, forcing the tectonic plates to move. Tectonic plates are also the cause for earthquakes. The next and third layer is the outer core, which is subject to intense heat, and as such, its elements of iron and nickel remain in a liquid state of 5,000 degrees Celsius. The outer core is constantly in motion with the convective currents that were mentioned above. One of the most important attributes of the outer core is a term that everyone has heard and can understand. The outer core has a strong magnetic field around Earth due to the convective currents in that outer core. A magnetic field is crucial in protecting the planet from a deadly wind from the sun. The outer core is necessary for the Earth to also have its magnetic field. In turn, the magnetic field is necessary for there to be life on Earth, along with our atmosphere, oceans, and all of our existence. The fourth layer of Earth is the inner core, which is solid, despite being hotter than the surface of the sun at 7,000 degrees Celsius. The reason it is solid is due to heavy pressure from the other layers. The heat that comprises the inside of Earth is due to heavy elements and radioactive decay and alleged remaining heat that was left over from Earth's original formation. When looking at just the information above about the composition of Earth, you can see that there is a lot of tumultuous movement and energy at play. We are predominantly only able to see what happens on the surface crust. And of course, that is where we find our forests, our oceans, our jungles, and our mountains. While we are only looking at this amazing surface of Earth, we do not think about the processes of Earth or how much energy is moving just below our feet. Now we will travel to Newfoundland on the eastern province of Canada at a place known as Littlefort. Has anybody been to Newfoundland before? Raise some hands. No one? There seems to be a little bit of an enhanced energy there. Newfoundland was where I climbed my very first mountain, as depicted in this top photograph here, and that was in July of 2018. This was a 2-week adventure with friends, Scott and Meg, both of which were seasoned hikers. At that time, I was a workaholic who found time to hike on the weekends. While the whole trip was special in its own little way, the most important part of this venture was that my interest in energy, earth energy, and ley lines was peaked again. One of the things that was special about Newfoundland was that in certain areas, you were standing on pieces of the Earth's mantle itself. Why is that important, you may ask? That is not something that can be accomplished everywhere you go, since the mantle is located below the crust that we walk upon. The mantle is not seen by the human eye, with the exception in this one place. The trip to Newfoundland can be credited for more thought into ley lines long after I obtained my science degree. During one part of the adventure, we were dropped off by boat onto a remote island from Trout River to Grosse Morne with no other people for about 3 days. This was one of the most memorable experiences of my life, relying solely on primitive living and in the absence of electronics. We crossed land at times by walking through water that was up to our waists. This type of experience invigorates the energy and the soul. I said then, and it became our mantra, that time does not exist here. While exploring, we came to find that a lot of rocks and rock fragments at different locations seemed to have writing on them. It was as though they were broken pieces of a tiny map. This was another item about the area that piqued my interest. There was plenty that stood out about this journey, but rather than hashing out the entire trip, I'll divulge the most fascinating of moments. There was one day in particular that caught me off guard. During this part of the adventure, we were at the Tablelands, which is a series of orange rock that kind of gave a feel of being on another planet. While having conversations with Scott and Meg, out of nowhere, Meg said ley lines. It just came out of her mouth. I was like, oh, what's going on there? So at the time, I knew what they were, but was surprised to hear someone else say that out loud. I inquired about her comment to see what she knew, and at that time, Meg said she did not know what they were. The word had just come to her. In a metaphysical sense, when a word just comes to you, I call that an impression. This occurs when a person obtains a piece of knowledge that comes to their mind but was not part of their usual information system. It seems to be a piece of universal information that was basically whispered in the wind, but not necessarily through that method. There were a lot of energetic points there in Newfoundland, which I would not have picked up as easily back then as I would now. Usually, when we go on vacation, we set out to relax, not necessarily exploring as much as we did during this adventure. We did not come to chase or seek any sort of ley line activity at that time, and simply continued to explore our highly energetic surroundings. An important piece of the Earth element, as mentioned before, is the magnetic field, which is also called the geomagnetic field. The magnetic field stems from the outer core inside of Earth and extends into space. There in space, it has an interaction between the sun's wind, also known as solar flares, and other charged particles that come from space in correlation to the Earth's magnetic field. One example of what life would look like on a planet without a magnetic field, we would just look at Mars, which basically appears to us to be an empty, barren place. Is it possible that Mars was once full of life before its magnetic field and atmosphere collapsed? Earth has not been immune to the strong effects of geomagnetic storms outside of the planet. We must remember that in the scientific sense, we are in a large ball called Earth, constantly moving through space with other planets and cosmic entities. Storms occur outside of our safe haven, and if those storms are particularly strong, then the solar flares can lead to disruptions to radio signals or even power blackouts here on Earth. Aside from what we experience here, astronauts in space would feel the full effects of those storms. Interestingly, I worked in news radio for 10 years, as previously mentioned, just prior to obtaining my science degree. From the early beginnings of working in news radio, I was educated on sunspots or sun flares, which would take out the broadcast signal. Those solar flares were generally brief, but we did prepare for them. A machine from the radio tower would print out on a small paper, which may have been a recording of each incident. Now, it is interesting to see how those experiences and moments in my life have come to further assist in my understanding of Earth events. There was a larger event that was been called the Carrington event in 1859 that allegedly caused system failures when telegraph systems were utilized. During this incident, there was a coronal mass ejection, also known as a CME, which was a flare of energetic charge from the sun's atmosphere that was comprised of magnetized plasma. Generally, it would take several days to reach Earth, but in this instance, the burst allegedly traveled over 90 million miles from the sun to Earth in only 17.6 hours, causing broadcast disruptions. In addition to the broadcast disruptions, it was alleged that there were sparks coming through the telegraph systems, and even paperwork was set on fire. If an event like that occurred today, the effects would be even more devastating than it was then, due to our heavier reliance on technology. There have been events where Earth technology has been completely blacked out due to these types of storms outside of Earth. Interestingly enough, at the time of writing this presentation, there have been several communication anomalies occurring in February and March of 2024, which has ranged from telephone signal disruptions to social media issues. Let's hope we're not in for another blip. Sunspot storms allegedly rise and fall in activity every 11 years. The next solar maximum storm was originally predicted for 2025, but that time frame has been moved up to this year of 2024. That's kind of actually something that would be exciting for those of you who are looking forward to the solar eclipse on April 8th, 2024. Above, we have already discussed how the sun can affect our communication in the sense of solar storms. The sun is crucial for life on planet Earth and has a necessary impact on Earth and water. While the sun is located outside of our terrestrial planet, its proximity to Earth and gravitational pull is what permits Earth to be a habitable planet. In the space sense, Earth is comprised of stardust. Earth's formation was not gentle and it was created through a supernova explosion in heat where the sun and other planets also formed. It is alleged that this happened about 4.5 to 4.8 billion years ago. The composition of the Earth we know is 29% land and 71% water. Of that water, 97% is considered saltwater, while only 3% is freshwater. Water cannot be forgotten when it comes to the existence of ley lines or energetic points within the Earth and the universe itself. Water is a well-known conductor, a cleanser, and is highly associated with healing and energy all